exploring the duty to be informed, news, mental health, and socialization. Hello there, friends. It's time for our monthly review of the wonderful comments you shared on the channel. Let's dive right in. First off, I collaborated with Coffin on a video about the news and whether we have a duty to be informed. Doble Storm left a thought-provoking comment, sharing that their psychiatrist advised against reading the news due to its potential negative impact on mental health. This made me reconsider our discussion. If there is a duty to be informed, and that includes watching the news, then perhaps this duty is mitigated in certain cases. Alternatively, as Peter suggested, we might view information sharing as a social activity. And just like avoiding rock climbing if you have a bad knee, it's reasonable to avoid news consumption if it's uniquely damaging or upsetting for you. R. Diaz and a few others pointed out that, in my discussion on active and passive voice in news headlines, both examples I provided were actually in the active voice. I apologize for the confusion and would appreciate it if someone could translate the headline I mistakenly identified as passive into the passive voice in the comments. This would help me better understand the distinction and the problem I was attempting to address. Advent 3456 asked about my role in the play Resin and Guild Stone Are Dead, which we discussed in a previous episode. I was in the play twice, first as the player, a force of nature character, and later as Hamlet. Mine raised an interesting point, suggesting that the word duty could deter people from a moral theory. Personally, I don't find the term off-putting, but I wonder if my perspective is influenced by my English background or my army cadet days. Does the word duty put you off the idea of a moral theory? Do you find the concept of duties corresponding to rights unappealing? Share your thoughts in the comments. Lastly, Venicius Moray commented on our duty to be informed, which leads us back to the initial discussion. It's clear that this topic has many layers and nuances, and I'm grateful for the insightful comments that help us explore it further. This raises an intriguing question about whether we might have corresponding obligations to inform others in various contexts. To be honest, I must admit this possibility hadn't occurred to me initially. While mandatory disclosure requirements primarily exist in legal frameworks, the broader ethical implications are worth exploring. For instance, consider how truth-telling obligations in everyday interactions could be viewed as a form of informational duty. When someone asks your opinion on their work, there's an unspoken expectation of honest feedback. Is that fundamentally different from formal disclosure requirements? This line of thinking becomes particularly interesting when applied to helping behaviors. Assisting someone might inherently involve sharing crucial information they lack, like warning a friend about potential health risks you've observed. Regarding my previous philosophical content, some viewers offered valuable critiques of my Plato analysis, particularly regarding the theory of forms. Several astute commentators noted I could have engaged more deeply with why ancient thinkers found this concept compelling. In hindsight, explaining the type-token distinction might have clarified how forms serve as universal templates for particular instances. While I remain skeptical about abstract objects existing independently, I should have better contextualized Plato's historical significance. An alternative interpretation proposed by viewers deserves special mention: the intriguing notion that forms might represent conceptual definitions rather than literal entities. While my university education emphasized literal interpretations aligned with dialogues like Phaedo, with its immortality arguments, and Meno, regarding recollection theory, this definition-focused perspective offers fresh insights. It raises fascinating questions about how such an interpretation would intersect with Plato's metaphysical claims about eternal truths. Responding to other thoughtful feedback, the connection between ideal selves and unhappiness indeed warrants deeper exploration. In my upcoming two-part series on self-perception theory, I examine these concepts through modern lenses, including internalized prejudice and the psychological impacts of solitary confinement. This research demonstrates how Plato's ancient ideas about idealized forms continue resonating in contemporary discussions of mental health and social systems. Imagine Plato, so inspired by his mentor Socrates that he essentially wrote fan fiction about him. It's fascinating to think about what drove Plato to do this, especially when we compare it to the dynamic between modern students and their university professors. There's something unique about the parasocial relationships formed with YouTubers that makes creating fan fiction seem more natural than doing so based on traditional teacher-student interactions. Plato's learning environment was quite different from today's classrooms. He attended symposia, events where philosophers gathered to give lectures. The atmosphere at these events must have been electric, sparking Plato's imagination and leading him to incorporate Socrates as a character in his works. While we can't know for sure what inspired Plato to write about Socrates, we can speculate that the symposia played a significant role. On a lighter note, although many have jokingly mentioned writing fan fiction about me, especially involving Natalie from ContraPoints, I haven't actually seen any such works. But who knows what the future holds? Now, let's address a question from Andrew Kolsky, a generous patron of the show. Andrew asks about the nature of inquiry and learning, which brings to mind Menno's paradox, a topic we discussed in our episode on Plato. For those unfamiliar, Plato argues that inquiry is impossible, leading him to conclude that all learning is merely a recollection of the forms. While I don't have a definitive stance on this, I've often wondered if Plato dismissed the idea of inquiry too quickly. He presents a binary view. Either you know exactly what you're looking for, making the search unnecessary, or you don't, making the search futile. But what if there's a middle ground? When solving a puzzle, you might not know the exact shape of the missing piece, but you have a rough idea. You can test potential fits until you find the right one. Perhaps Plato overlooked this nuanced approach to inquiry. That's all the comments we have time for today. Thank you for watching. As you're watching this, I'm at VidCon in California. If you're also there and see someone who looks just like me, it's probably me. Please come say hello. For those not at VidCon, stay tuned for the credits.